Hi everyone, welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan, and today on Wandering DMs, we're going to be talking about money in D&D. How many coins are there, what type, how they've evolved with the game, and how to get your smoggy players to part with it. All that and more today on Wandering DMs.
Before we get into that, I'll remind everyone, as always, at the end of the show, we'll be hosting our after-party chat. That is a private video chat with Dan and I and all of our patrons on our private Discord server. If you'd like to join in on that, you can by simply becoming one of our patrons. Visit us at patreon.com/wanderingdms. Join at any tier. You'll get an invite to our Discord server. And come 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time today, you'll be a part of the after-party chat. It'll be great.
We love that every Sunday.
Yeah.
So you came up with this. I'm so glad you suggested this topic today, Paul, because it's one of these things where I dig into so much and so deeply that I forget that the high level issues are something that maybe we've never actually talked about publicly. As it's water that I'm swimming through in the depths all the time. What brought this to your mind this week?
Gosh, that's a good question. I'm not sure why it struck me exactly now, but it's one of those fascinating topics, I think, Dan, where our histories kind of collided, right? Because when we got into old school D&D, you originally started with original edition, right, and dug deep into that. I went into BX and dug deep into that, and I had my own house rules going for BX, and you were writing the original edition Delta. And somewhere along the lines, we discovered that this is one of the topics where we had the same solution. Like we both came independently to the same place, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is what many of us refer to as the silver standard for edit to the D&D economy, in which, whereas original D&D, and every edition has stuck with this, every edition of D&D has always had their base coin be gold. And the original, you roll for how much money in gold you start with, and all the prices of the basic equipment are in gold, et cetera, from original D&D all through 5th. And it's screwy. And the truth is, it's really screwy. And among the problems are a lot. It's sufficiently off target from historical actual values that a lot of people just throw up their hands and go, D&D economy just can't make any sense of it. It's totally crazy. It's totally fantastic. You might as well just set random numbers to everything. There's no way anybody can ever possibly make it rational. And the really funny thing is, if you just go in and go, everywhere it said gold, I'm going to make it silver. It's actually surprisingly on target. Not perfect. Yeah, it is, but it's on the right order of magnitude.
Yeah,
we'll see you next week, everybody.
Is, done. Peace out. All right. Just colliding. I have a collision of thoughts here in my brain of all the directions I want to take this. I want to point out, frankly, this enters my brain recently just from watching your recently completed run of Pool of Radiance. Right, so you were playing Pool of Radiance in Dan Plays Games from the Elder Time. And in that game, like, one of the first things I think that smacks you in the face, money on the side of money, right? You roll up characters. You're using AD&D, right? Pretty much by the book, first edition AD&D. You have to buy equipment, right? It gives you your starting gold, gives you your starting money in gold, from which you have to buy equipment. You're too poor to purchase some of the nicer stuff, right? You can't put all your fighters in plate mail. You just don't have enough money for that. Then, if you're on top of things and you realize what's going on, the very next thing you have to do after buying equipment is to go to the tavern and rest up so that you can memorize your spells before you go get into any fights at all. And you walk into the tavern and they tell you, welcome to the tavern, stay here, or welcome to the inn, to stay here, you need to pay us 1 platinum piece. And they're very specific. It's got to be 1 platinum piece. If you have 10 gold, that's not good. Nope, not taking your 10 gold pieces. Give me 1 platinum piece, which is just bizarre. An odd choice. But look at this. I mean, it strikes me as shocking that we're playing first level beginner characters, and the very first, interaction with money is I have to deal with platinum pieces, which I feel like is already wow, that's early for something that feels like a bit of a kludge in the system, in the economy of D&D. I realized this when I was writing the description here in the YouTube video. I was looking up money. Generically, I just was like, let's see what Wikipedia has to say about money. And I got to this section, which I've included in the show notes here, that say in most major economies using coinage, copper, silver, and gold form the three tiers of coins. And I was like, wow, really? That's what they use in D&D. What do you know? D&D actually did something based on historical accuracy? Wow, I had no idea. I mean, it makes sense. Why not? Right? And then it goes on to say, gold coins were used for large purchases, payment of the military, and backing of state activities. Silver coins were used for mid-sized transactions, such as the unit of account for taxes, dues, contracts, and fealty, while copper coins represented the coinage of common transactions. Right? And then it goes on to talk about the origins of that from ancient India and how that spread into medieval Europe, and how during medieval in the sort of medieval period there was no new money or no new precious metals were coming into Europe through either mining or conquest. So pretty much the amounts of gold, silver, and copper in the economy was constant. Anyway, I think that's fascinating because right there in that description, we see like, gosh, your average adventurer, not that exists in historical medieval period, but let's say your average non-lord, right? Somebody who's maybe not quite a serf, but not a member of the nobility, probably not using gold, right? Like gold is for the military and state activities, right? These are big purchases.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
exactly. So I think one of our, it's one of the observations about money that if your three basic types in original D&D, your three basic types were copper, silver, gold. The other stuff was added as an option or something like that. It's where you start at the top end, right? You'd think in a role playing game where the idea is leveling up from bottom to top, right? That you'd start with the worst stuff and then graduate to the better stuff. So if from a game design standpoint, you would assume that you'd start off with copper for purchases and treasure, and that you'd elevate upwards over time to get to experience all this stuff. I think one of our commenters on our Discord server, actually, I think it was Olaf or our ranger friend, mentioned this as the on ramp. I think. The pathway up through to experience the different treasure types, which I 100% totally agree with. It's weird at the top end rather than the bottom end, because at the top end there's no experiential extra stuff to come.
Yeah, and I would say even even worse on the bottom end, copper pretty much is useless out of the gate, right? Like it's nobody wants copper pieces. From level 1 on, nobody wants copper pieces. It is utter trash.
Yeah. Even as a big treasure, right? Even if you just find it for free in the dungeon, right?
Yeah.
You just discard it. Right off the bat.
You could totally run a first level AD&D first edition campaign, and in room 1 you find giant piles of copper coins, and the party would probably go, we move on, right? Which is just bizarre, right? And I find when you switch to the silver standard, the nice thing is, you get, copper is still not great, but it's meaningful. First level characters might load their sacks with copper coins just for the XP, right? And again, now we're talking about like, universal translation of gold into silver. So everything is 10 times cheaper, or is that right? 10 times, everything is 10 times cheaper by the book, and your experience points are based on silver pieces, not gold pieces, right? And so so now copper is actually worth a 10th of an experience point. So hey, that's something. It's better than 100th. And technically by original D, a fifth, right? It's actually times 5 times 5, so it's actually a fifth. So you need 5 copper pieces to get you an XP point in original D&D. Yeah. Wait, really? Yeah, that's bizarre. I'm used to it being decimal. Yeah. Not that either is really very historically accurate, right? Because you decimal kids. I mean, well, frankly, this is a case where actually I really adore Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, where we use our proper 12 and 20. Okay, all right. Well, I didn't disbelieve you. I'm just surprised that I never noticed that. Just showing everybody else. Yeah. yeah, it's I don't know. Where was I going with that? Right, like I always kind of liked the oddity of Warhammer's more historic system based on English
Right.
coinage.
Yes.
Of
Yep.
20 copper to the silver and 12 silver to the gold, but whatever. Decimal is easy to deal with, so I like decimal.
It's the other way around, isn't it? 12 copper to silver and 20 silver to gold. Am I right?
Yeah, probably accurate. Yeah. Anyway, you really just derailed me, Dan. What was I trying to
I'm sorry. Copper is still useful. Copper is still useful and gets you
not
value.
Not only is copper still useful, right? But if you consider kind of the OD&D scale of like level 10 is name level, so that's like the top tier. When we get to level 10, we're doing the best we can do. Then I find when playing with a silver standard, by the time you reach about 5th level is when the players want to start calculating in gold rather than silver. And I find that satisfying. I like that.
Yes.
Honestly, when I run OD&D now, I use gold for starting money because I just say you have 3d6 gold. No multiplication needed. 3d6 gold. There you go.
Right. Yes, right. And then, right.
Yeah, it's great. You go, oh, well, I have whatever 12 gold pieces. Huh. Yeah. Well, how much does plate armor cost? More than that. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me throw up two comments. Let me throw up a couple comments, which we've had some great comments already in the first couple minutes. First of all, for example, Kevin Thompson is saying that he decimalized everything in his game. So I shake my fist at you, Kevin. I shake my fist at you. But moving on, our friend Hobo Ogre asked the excellent question. I'll throw up on screen here. Mail and plate should be way more expensive than listed in most game versions. And you're right. Maybe I'll mention that in a little bit. So there's a couple of things. Like when I'm saying switch to silver standard and the equipment and cost lists in original D&D like surprisingly on target, there's a couple of exceptions, and that's yes, armor should be dialed up. And like Paul said, they did it in advanced D&D, right? That was observed. That was correctly increased in advanced D&D. It makes a lot of sense. And again, it's both realistic and it's good for game design. And for me, you hit those two beats at the same time, right? That's your gold standard for game design, is it both kind of matches the real world and it's eminently playable. And the question from CalStaff that I wanted to address is CalStaff's asking, if you go to a silver standard, then do you need to divide random treasure generated by 10 or 20? And for me, the answer is yes. If I'm using standard D&D treasure tables, that's exactly correct, CalStaff, I divide everything by 10. So if you're using the standard D&D treasure types, for example, instead of generating everything in units of thousands of coins, which is what they had to do initially, now you're generating hundreds of coins, which is something you could actually carry away rather than just have to throw your hands up at it. I can't carry thousands and thousands of coins. But now it becomes something you can actually carry out.
Yeah. You could do the other thing, which is just shift the metals, right? The gold becomes silver or what have you. But then it leaves you kind of this question. Well, what about the copper pieces? What do those become?
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to divide by 10.
Can you never get the platinum now? Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I thought about that. Right? Initially, I thought about that, but for the generated treasure, it seems better to just divide by 10.
Let's talk about the weight of coins though, because that's you mentioned like you could carry it away, and that's another aspect of this topic that I love to talk about, which is how much does a coin weigh? I asked you that, Dan, at the very beginning, just before we went online, and I have my BX copy here, and I'm looking at page B20. As you correctly pointed out in the very first paragraph, it says 10 coins weigh 1 pound. 10 coins weigh a pound. So,
and that's consistent all through original D&D and AD&D and homes and everything like that,
which I find personally quite surprising and I think wrong. And that is another thing I like to house rule is I think that is way too few coins per pound. And that just comes back with like what I visualize, what I think of when I'm thinking of treasure. I have some visual aids here, Dan, that I'm going to try and show. So
I'm so glad.
Chest. Oops! Oh, I dropped them all over my desk. Oops!
Oh, thievery! Thievery's happening.
Yeah. have these
I've been
coins,
burgled.
which I love. These are just whatever. I think they're reproductions of maybe pieces of 8 or something like that. They look. I don't know. That looks about like what I expect for treasure in D&D.
Right.
Okay. Any guesses, Dan, on how much one of these coins weighs?
I think something like that would probably be like 1/50th of a pound, or possibly less.
Yeah. So on my kitchen scale, one of these coins weighs 0.2 ounces. So about 50 to the pound, which feels right to me. On the other hand, let me show you this. This is a soul coin from a promotional coin that Wizards put out for the Descent of Avernus. This is a soul coin. Look at this. This thing's got some serious heft to it.
Yeah, it's a weapon.
This guy weighs 1.5 ounces. So, pretty close to 10 of these to the pound.
Yeah, 10 to the pound.
So if you're going 10 to the pound, this is the size of your gold piece.
Right.
Which, frankly, is really big, in my opinion. That is a heavy coin that you're toting around.
Right, exactly. And I think people have pointed out, if you go to a museum and you look at ancient medieval coins or something like that, they're on the small side.
Yeah, I would say they're
like
probably
dimes.
even smaller than these little repros. They're more like dimes,
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
these are hefty compared to what
Right.
maybe is more historically accurate.
Already, your first example is big coins. Frankly, they're already historically big coins. They're not like comedically giant.
Yeah, I mean that's like these things. I kind of like them, but again, these would be 50 to the pound, and I frankly don't mind, for the sake of decimalization, going to 100 per pound, and that makes the coins even a little smaller.
It's not crazy. Yeah, it's more on. See, I think there's a big variation there. Pick some round number that makes you happy. I'm perfectly fine with that, but it's frankly more on target to say 100 per pound than it is to say 10 per pound. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so I don't know. I always found that a little strange. Frankly, I was never a fan of BX's attempt to standardize encumbrance weight in coins. I mean, I guess it's clever because you know how much treasure your chainmail armor is actually worth.
Right.
But I was never really a big fan of that.
I guess I should say, if you're using my OED house rules, right? Again, just like you did, Paul, right in the same direction. I increase the number of coins per pound. And do you know what that number is?
The number of coins per pound? Is it 50?
Yeah. It's higher than 50.
Oh, really? What do you got? 100?
Yeah. It's lower than 100. It's kind of in between. Yeah.
Oh, wait, it's lower than 100? Wait, it's somewhere in between?
Yeah,
Dan?
it's right, yeah. It's 71.4285714. But who cares about that? Because the rule is it's 1,000 per stone, which works out, which just happens to work out above 50. Right, is the important thing. It's 1,000 per. If you like round numbers, say 1,000 per stone, and then you're golden, or silver or copper, or whatever you prefer.
Yeah, if you for some reason are a psychopath who likes to measure things in stones. Oh boy.
Well, I mean, okay, we're not going to get into that, right? This is separate. These are separate discussions. But yes, OED, I got everything in stone, so that the numbers you're really dealing with are smaller.
Yeah, I think.
It's one thing I haven't persuaded Paul about yet.
No, I can't do it.
But what we agree is that the coins, it's useful to have the coins smaller. If we say 50 or 70 or 100 per pound, right? All those things are non-crazy.
I will share this with you, Dan, though, that this stuff, so that combined with the fact that when you get out your copy of BX, you annoyingly discover that the encumbrance of equipment is in a totally different chart on a totally different page from the cost in gold pieces, which annoys me to no end. And then these little issues of switching to a silver standard and like normalizing the weight of coins. This is what all led me to really evaluating my use of BX versus use of Labyrinth Lord. There's several articles on my blog about like trying to expand the BX encumbrance chart, because also the BX encumbrance chart does that nice hand wavy thing of like all other equipment. I don't know, 40 pounds, whatever. Don't care.
Yep, and that's an original D&D for what it's worth.
Yeah, I realize that. That also bothers me. So I like used Labyrinth Lord to expand things out, and then I was like, oh my gosh, it's all crazy talk. Everything's wrong because, of course, Labyrinth Lord, despite being a BX clone, is based on the 3.0 SRD. Therefore, there's some D&D 3-isms in there, including like weights of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And let me just make one small point about this issue about the gear and the equipment. So you're pointing out in BX, the prices of stuff, the cost list, and the weights are on separate pages. Well, in Advanced D&D, they did one better than that. They're in different books, right? So the basic equipment list is in the player's handbook, and I guess the weapon weights are there, but the weight of everything else you have to go look up in the DM's guide. In fact, an appendix in the DM's guide. So you might think to say, well, these were like separate systems, and nobody ever thought about that. But look, here it is in original D&D. Here's weights, here's prices. They're on facing pages. You just open up this issue is one of the things that when I got original D&D at a late stage, I was like, oh my goodness, it's so coherent, it makes sense in the original form. Oh my goodness. And it was among the revelations that I had.
Except that your encumbrance chart there has all of 10 entries on it before it goes, everything else, I don't know, 8 pounds, 80 pounds, whatever it is. Everything else.
You have a point. You have a point. Right?
Everything else. Don't worry about it.
You're not crazy. I mean, there's a bit at the top. There's a bit at the bottom for treasures.
I mean, as we know, Dan, in order to have a successful D&D campaign, accurate records must be kept.
Of encumbrance, we agree. We all agree with that. All right.
I don't know. I was never a fan of this hand wavy. Like, I don't know. The rest of the stuff, I'd weigh some amount. Let's not think about it. Well, then why have encumbrance rules at all?
There's a lot of. There's a. Oh, you're one of those people. If I'd known that. Okay, so assuming that you pay any attention to it at all, right? Yeah. Among the nice things about adjusting the treasure scale, right? Both in value for the silver standard and also weights, like Paul's talking about, is that the characters can pull out a much greater amount of value and like a useful amount of value, frankly. So if the coinage is, times 10 and the weight has been adjusted by times 10, the players can actually haul out like about effectively 100 times the value in a bag than in standard D&D. And honestly, standard D&D, it's too little. You have to pull out thousands and thousands and thousands of gold pieces that requires, ultimately, it's so broken. This is why you need a bag of holding, right? Traditionally, almost every D&D party has a bag of holding, and it's required because it's a patch over the broken valuation system. And that bothered the heck out of me. And if you just make this little fairly small switch, you don't need a magic bag patch. It just kind of works. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So personally, I'm much more in favor of that.
I mean, I like when the weight of treasure is interesting, right? Like, yes, there's moments in the game where we're exploring and I found this big treasure chest full of gold. So am I going to scoop it into my backpack, and what gear do I have to leave behind is kind of an interesting problem for players to face. And I don't know, I like, maybe call me sadistic, but I like as a DM occasionally, presenting them with like, here's thousands of copper coins, thousands of them. Like, you could definitely get a couple hundred XP out of this room if you're willing to try and figure out how to haul it all out of here.
Yes.
Or here in the throne room, the throne is made out of solid silver. Clearly worth a fortune. Yeah. If you can lift it and get it out of here.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
Those are all great. Enjoy.
I remember you and I, Dan, once played in a game where we found a golden statue, and we were so excited about it. We looked at it, and of course, the DM at the time smirked at us and said, "It's way too heavy for you to carry." So we promptly removed its hand Great. We're chopping the hand off. We're taking the hand.
Right.
Couple pounds of gold? Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. We're taking part of it.
Yep. If I can't take all of it, I'm taking a piece.
That's exactly what we did, right?
Yeah.
I should bring up like a couple images here. If you can bring up the first image that I've got. Did we talk about this beforehand? Did you know that I set images up?
I have your images. Okay, so this is charts. Wait, that's
the red dot.
Yeah, fine. I got it for you.
So I got a shout out, right? There's an article by Louis Pulsifer, who still writes a lot on social media, very energetic still. And this is the 40th anniversary of this article, actually, where I personally learned about the idea of the silver standard, right? So in Dragon number 74, which was June of 1983, Pulsifer wrote this article called "A Player, Character, and His Money," and you can see the first headline that I highlighted there is the silver standard. And basically, 40 years ago, Lewis said most of the stuff that we're saying today. And the idea that you just change the basic currency and all this, and just say it's all silver and things work out better. He says the same thing about you should make the coins lighter so they can carry more, and therefore you don't need a magic bag or a mule. His research in this article is that it's about 200 coins per pound actually would be reasonable for historical coinage. Gives some kind of historical motivation for why there were big caches of treasure around. Exactly like Paul said, the fact that the silver and gold hadn't been mined since the ancient period. So people were kind of on the lookout for where had people hidden all the ancient silver and gold, because we're not in the situation where we can mine it these days. And then actually most of the article goes through how, and the idea is the fundamental motivation is kind of, if you don't think about it, traditional D&D, the players wind up having these giant mountainous, smog-like treasure rooms, like you can see in the illustration there. How do you solve this ridiculous aspect of the game? So there's turn it to silver, make the money smaller. They don't need these big gobs of things. And then how do they spend it? And he goes through several pages of things, some of which is in the original rules, and then some other ideas. So we did a whole episode about that before, right, Paul?
We did. Season 5. Season 3, episode 5 is player expenses. Where does the gold go? We talk a lot about how to separate players from their money. Go check that out if you want to hear it.
We'll let people go see that, but Pulsifer does the same thing. It talks about upkeep and strongholds and henchmen and magic research and magic items and getting rumors, right, and investments and other stuff like theft. Even has gambling, which to my mind seems like an early proto carousing rule to me. Nice. You can have a gambling house and maybe they get money or maybe they get special rumors only in the gambling house. And so Lewis was great sensibility early on for ways to improve the traditional game. So and I'll just look at one more image when you get a chance.
I bet he doesn't get to one of my favorite ways to get rid of money. Which is the idea of tying the XP gain to spending rather than gaining of gold, which is a fascinating thing. I haven't played with it deeply myself, but I love that idea of like, no. If you want the XP for these gold pieces, spend them.
You're right. That's a newer idea.
Clever.
Yep. But if you can get Dragon 74, great article. You should read that. So this is I have a link on the description here to a blog I wrote a couple of years ago where I take the prices in D&D and from what I can get out of historical sources, the prices of those things historically in the Middle Ages and correlate them. And you can see, generally speaking, they're more or less correlated. What you can see is they kind of fall along a straight line most of the time with very few exceptions. The original prices in D&D, they're not batshit crazy. They're not insane. And so the top chart is the basic equipment out of the players list. The second one is the cost of castle construction, which you wouldn't think to be like pretty justified again when you switch stuff to silver. And the bottom one is the prices of mercenaries, wages for mercenaries. And if they're kind of following along a straight line all the time, so they kind of match the trends of historical medieval prices, again, with a couple caveats. One, we're switching from gold to silver. Two, the wages for mercenaries actually are correctly in gold. Actually, that's the one thing you should, if you make the switch, the wages for armies actually should remain in gold, actually. And then three, as we mentioned, the couple of outlier dots in that first chart is armor, like mail and plate, really ought to be pricier. Those are the two dots that are up. And then I think the carts and wagons actually should be cheaper than they are in D&D. And those are the only two dots that go down. And other than that, you make the switch to silver, it's surprisingly on target. Even for castle costs, which really surprised me.
Maybe. It's funny. I was trying to remember. I felt like I had done a lot of research on this myself, and I was looking at my own blog, being like, didn't I do a bunch of research on this at some point? But no, the answer is no. I researched money in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which is a whole different can of worms than it is in D&D, because it is radically inconsistent, frankly. Radically inconsistent as you compare editions of Warhammer from first edition to second edition, and then I jumped to fourth edition because we generally don't talk about third edition Warhammer Fantasy very much. But you have things like you have things that are consistent, and then you have other things that go up or down, and it seems almost arbitrary, like the cost. I was trying to kind of I think this is maybe when I was working on 10 Dead Rats, and I was trying to come up with like what is a reasonable economy for this game, and I went, oh my gosh, it's just all over the map in the original Warhammer editions. Anyway, that's a thing. Maybe if I can find a way to do this, maybe I'll share a funny chart from that with you. But anyway, proceed, Dan. Let's get back into D&D.
So again, folks can see the article that I've got those charts in on my blog in the link on the YouTube description of this show right here. Should I? One thing I will say. Okay, so you're talking about Warhammer and several other games that have the 20 and 12 ratio between your three basic types. And one thing that I point out sometimes that, and I don't mind that. One thing that I point out sometimes that sometimes gets people's hackles up is the fact that, of course, all that's based on European, in England, you would call them shillings and pounds, right? Pence, shillings, and pounds. Other European countries use the exact same system with different names. It actually comes from the system laid down by Charlemagne, to my understanding, in France. And the observation I make is that shillings and pounds weren't coins in the Middle Ages. If you're in the Middle Ages and you wanted to put together a shilling or a pound, it would take multiple coins because they didn't exist as coins. And it's this funny thing whereby they have this term, units of account, which means that it's a unit that you'd use in your bookkeeping. It's not actually a coin that you could pick up. So, and the comparison I make, sometimes people talk about like a grand, like, oh, that's going to set me back like $3,000 or something for a computer or, used car or something like that. And of course, a grand isn't actually a bill in the United States nowadays. You can't give me a $1,000 bill, but it's a unit that we all understand how much it is. And similarly, and they kind of did this in AD&D, this, what I consider to be a bit of a mistake, is that there wasn't a silver piece isn't the same as a shilling, and a gold piece isn't the same as a pound. What I can assume in my case is a note, because only use silver.
Oh dear, Dan, are you still there with us? Your audio is really cutting out right now. Sorry, everyone. It seems to me like Dan is having some technical issues. Oh, wait, maybe you're back. Are you there, Dan?
Am I back? I think I'm back.
I
Yes.
think I can hear you. I can hear you. You're talking about
Awkward. Sorry.
shillings and pounds being bookkeeping units of transaction, but not existing as actual physical coins.
Right. So what you do have for real, if you can still hear me, is like a groat, which was a silver coin worth a third of a shilling, and a noble in England, which was a gold coin worth a third of a pound. And for what it's worth, if you actually use those, then the for argument's sake, the gold coin is worth 20 times the silver, but the silver coin's only worth 4 times the copper for the actual coins they really had. So once again, right, you could use that, which I considered at one point, and once again, copper is still something that's kind of useful. Has some utility. You can pull it out and get some value out of it. So those are the actual coins that were commonly used, like in England in the Middle Ages, and that would be gameable.
For sure.
Yep.
I guess As much as I enjoyed the Warhammer notation, right, of 12 and 20s, because it has character. I think ultimately I did not carry that forward into 10 Dead Rats. I'm trying to remember if I did or did not, but I don't think I did, because it is cumbersome, right? There's a cumbersome units for players to try and think in. So I don't know, for ease of use, I like shifting things into decimal. I don't know, and it makes things like what we were talking about earlier about generating treasure using other tables much easier, especially for us. That system ultimately was based on OD&D mechanically, with a layer of Warhammer on top of it. Anyway,
I mean, you know me, that I do like, right, as we mentioned before, I actually do like having archaic units in my D&D game, and I actually like having the players have to confront this, flavorful way of measuring. So measuring stuff in, for starters, feet and yards and leagues and stone and things like that. I actually, and some kind of, and a weird non-decimal coin system, if it's not too bad.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like them having to confront the alien nature of this world.
I can see that. I do. When we get into units of measure that are something that the player's going to have to visualize in their head and think about, what does this mean? I like something that is relatable, which is ultimately why I don't like the stone system. I think people don't think in that way. Whereas, if you ask me, what does 20 pounds feel like to pick up? Well, I mean, I have weights, I have exercise weights that I use all the time. It's gonna argue with me and be like, stone is totally reasonable. Dan, nobody bowls anymore.
It's not true.
Okay, so
if I go on a Friday, Saturday night, there's more than one person.
How can I visualize a sixth of a stone?
Don't.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Yeah. What are you talking about? There's a stone right there. One stone.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We could argue all day about whether or not stones are useful or not.
Stone's really heavy. You can hurt yourself with this if you don't know.
Yeah. I think here in America, we're very used to feet and maybe a little less so of yards, but certainly feet is a thing that we think of. So it's just a little more relatable, I think, to our players, which I think is important when you're trying to visualize and describe things. Oh, it's 50 feet away. What does that mean? Kind of. Well, I know my living room is 10 feet wide. 5 of those. Okay, great. Anyway,
should we talk about money as XP?
Yes,
which kind of interacts with this, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Do you like, right, traditional D&D has money as a core part of his experience award system. And I think, right, you got it in original, you got it in first edition, you got it in Moldvay's BX. And did that become optional like in second edition? Every time I have to always look this up because I tend to forget. I think it became optional in second edition, then it was just gone in third edition.
Here's the thing. I was literally just talking to this talking about this to Tanya, who was only real experience playing D&D is with 5th edition. And of course, 5th edition introduces the idea of kind of DM fiat based leveling, right? Where leveling happens, I can't remember what they call it, but like this story based, we don't track any numbers. We just say, okay, now everybody levels up. Go.
Milestone based? Is that it? Milestone based?
Milestone, yeah, I think milestone is the right thing. You know, it's a fascinating way to do experience, and it's something like I like the idea, frankly, of tying experience points to goals. It's something I've played with in the past. And I think we did this in 10 Dead Rats, where I tried to have the players come up with goals, party goals, and personal goals, and then I assigned XP rewards to those so that we could have kind of plot-based XP rewards, which I kind of like. It's very abstract, right? It's very wishy-washy. It's a little hard to put your finger on, and I think that's the main problem with it. So then we go back, as you go back in editions, you look at how else have we earned experience points? And traditionally the answer is money, treasure, and killing monsters. And the fascinating thing to me, right, is how those two things inverted somewhere along the line, right? In the early editions, most of your XP comes from money, right? You get a little bit for killing monsters, but it's not much, and it's not the clear way to get ahead. And somewhere, I think maybe around 3rd edition, this inverts, and it is much more about killing monsters and much less about the money, right? And I think that has a profound impact on the way the game is played. Granted, yes, I think that most players aren't constantly thinking about, I need to level up, how do I level up? But it is a concern. It is something that's in their heads. They want to increase their level and make their character better and whatnot. And so they are thinking about that when they think about, well, what does my character want to do? What are my goals in the game? How do I get what I need to get ahead? And in the early editions, I think because it's so based in money, you get thematic things where players are more likely to want to steal or rob or abscond with money one way or another, right? In old editions, it's better to rob the dragon's hoard and get out of there without the dragon noticing you than to kill the dragon. Whereas as you get into later editions, it's much more valuable to the players to kill the dragon and then maybe take some of its treasure. But you're probably going to cherry pick the nice stuff, and then I don't want to be weighed down with hundreds of pounds of coins. And I think that has a profound impact on the way the game is played. Frankly, I think that it's really changed. That's why you have early editions of the game focusing so much more on exploration, because I want to find where the treasure is so that I can get it and get out. Whereas the later editions are a little more combat oriented, because I need to kill the things to get the experience points to level up. That's my opinion.
Those are great thoughts. And sometimes I don't think about it because I stick so much with the traditional D&D, which agrees on this point, right? So whether I look at original D&D or advanced or mold-based BX or whatever, this is a point of agreement that all through that. So I don't even think about milestone leveling as an option in my games. But you're so right. And sometimes I think new players come to it and like a counter argument can be made. Well, it shouldn't be about money, right? It just shouldn't be about money. It doesn't make sense that I'm getting more experience for money. But it's a really great conjuration of the pulp fantasy influences, right? Your primary exemplars of characters from pulp fiction that D&D was trying to recreate was Conan and Elric and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. And they're not nice guys. But they're not these are not nice noble paladins, who are going out to save people initially, right? They're mercenaries, they're ne'er-do-wells, they're rogues, and they're pretty mercenary. They want money, right? So fundamentally, most of their jobs are, I'm going to go rob someplace. I'm going to go find something and rob it. And if something else happens along the way, it's semi-accidental. And so it's a great conjuration And it also kind of communicates that this game initially is not about noble heroes. It's about ne'er-do-well rogues, who are grasping and greedy. Fundamentally, that's what that says to you. And so I kind of stick to that. And when I bring new players into original D&D, I use that and say, or kind of communicate that maybe this is sort of an accidental critique of capitalism, right? You're in desperate straits. There's no social safety net. You were veterans. You were in a war. You don't have any other skills. The war is over. What are you going to do now? You're going to go rob tombs. You don't have any other options in your skill set. And so I don't mind grabbing onto that. And I do feel that if it was something, and as some of our viewers have said, it's objective, right? You can put a specific number on it. The players can go, oh, I'm so close to leveling up. We can push into one more room. Or if we could push into one more room, we could probably level up. So it kind of drives very discrete gameplay like that. One person can be up and the other person's a little bit below the same level, and they're like, oh, I want to be the same level as them. And if we say at the outset of D&D that this was kind of a crude game design, okay, but it gave us the model of let's award XP for play that you want to see in the game. And if nowadays you want to come in and say you have the time and you have the energy to set a large number of heterogeneous, awards for saving something or cleaning something up or whatever, go ahead and do that. And, fundamentally, it's a good idea to have awards that promote the gameplay you want to see. And that was the original way. And it's synthetic with the original Pulp Fiction.
Right. I mean, I totally agree with that. And I think that, the defenders of the milestone XP system, and I think this is, and I kind of agree with a little bit this myself, is that it does open up more gameplay styles, right? We can have a D&D game that is about a court intrigue, right? It's not about monsters, killing monsters. It's not about getting money. It's about political machinations. Great. And then we can assign XP. We can have you level up by engaging with that kind of role play, which I think is great. But I think CalStaff kind of puts it, in their comments here, really hits the nail on the head. And I think you were quoting this earlier, Dan. CalStaff says GP as XP is objective, milestone is subjective and open to disputes. And that's really the issue. Earlier today when I was describing this to Tanya, she said, one of the things I think that I said that I connected with her is that one of the issues with the milestone XP system is that it's so disconnected from the actual goals, right? It's just, well, when you achieve whatever plot goals we decide, you'll level up and I'll tell you. It doesn't tell the players what to do, right? Well, what do I do? We're day one of the first day of our adventure. I've made my character. What should I do? Right? And I tried a little bit to solve this, frankly, in the 10 Dead Rats game by saying, like, well, I'm going to have you players generate your goals, right? I'm not going to tell you that it's a political intrigue. You can make it a political intrigue if you want by saying my goal is to get rid of this lord through political machinations, and go, great, let's assign an XP amount to that. And so that's fine. But that puts the impetus on the players to figure that stuff out. Do they know?
Agreed.
Right? On day one, do they know that lord exists or that this should be their goal? And it's very soft, right? The problem that I was running into was that, when they came up with the goal, did I have enough context with which to assign the amount of XP they were going to get for that goal? How long is that going to take them to achieve that goal? I don't really know. And so sometimes it was way off in either direction. Sometimes it was like, oh, that was such an easy goal. We finished it in a night. Oh, okay, great. Everybody gets a bunch of XP. Sometimes it took months. And we're like, man, it's been a long time since the characters leveled up. So it's really difficult. So I do appreciate systems like Gold or Monster Killing, but I think I like Gold better, of saying, like, yeah, there's a very easy mechanical correlation here. Each gold piece you gain is an experience point in your pocket. That's how you're going to level up.
Or each silver piece.
Right.
Yes, right. I very much agree. There's a lot of benefits to it that I really like. And also that I'm not, that the players can't point at, there's less impetus, I think, for the players to point at the referee and go, we think we should have been leveling up more. And I can go, you should have gotten more treasure. that's on you.
It does lead us to, I think, a topic that we haven't talked about, Dan, which is the inverse of this, which is then how do I know how much treasure to put in my dungeon when I'm stocking a dungeon? And that's been a head scratcher for, I think, both of us for a while. It's not an easy thing to solve. The books give you a chart, like stock your dungeon in this way, roll these dice and randomly determine and roll in these charts. I think you and I have both been a little dissatisfied with that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's a whole separate hour, and I've spent a lot of work on this issue. I've done a lot of work on this issue, as you know, of course. And my thesis these days is that there was a struggle, frankly, between Arneson and Gygax, and that they didn't agree on this issue. And in original D&D, you basically have two systems. There's one treasure system that is connected to the monsters in Volume 2, and there's a second system that's gauged to the dungeon level in Volume 3, and they're completely different. And within a year of D&D being published, Gygax starts showing these brand new charts that are totally different than the monster treasure types. And so if D&D came out in 1974, by 1975, the very first TSR magazine had this new chart for treasure, and then he's got these series of publications in the mid 70s that totally change it. And so my thesis is that right at the start, it was very unclear, it was very ambiguous, and Gygax actually didn't like the system that Arneson came up with, and very quickly he had a totally separate second system. And that's something that we can maybe talk about more another day. But to me, there's at least two systems in original D&D, and they don't match up at all.
So since we don't have very much time left in this episode, can we cut to the chase? Do you have a recommendation for how to put treasure into your dungeon?
I do, but it doesn't fit in this margin. I've kicked it around on our Discord server, right? So I have a prototype of a one-page system that generates treasure kind of in the same flavor as Gygax's system, and we've kicked it around on Discord, and people said that it looked reasonable. It's what I'm going to use going forward. And I will say this: look at this. Right, the treasure types is just one example. Is the treasure types for monsters, right? In original D&D and all through early D&D, they're in units of thousands, like we said. So you make a treasure, and it's going to be 2 to 10,000 copper pieces and 1 to 6,000 gold pieces. It's all in thousands. If you look at any of Gygax's adventures, there's no treasures like that. There's no treasures in thousands, right? If you look in when he was running his Greyhawk first level at a convention once, the treasures are like 20 gold pieces or like 80 silver pieces. And if you look in the famous Keep on the Borderlands, the treasures are not always 3,000, 5,000, 8,000, right? They're in different units, like usually hundreds. So for the same issue of like, it's kind of ridiculous to always have to deal with thousands of gold. Even look at the Dungeon board game. Right, the treasure's like a sack of 100 gold pieces or a sack of 200 gold pieces. It's not always thousands. So, I think Gygax had a more nuanced system, and I do kind of like looking at that. And I personally don't use the monster treasure types myself.
All right, great.
That's more another episode. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll have to come back to that and talk about stocking treasure.
I have hundreds of spreadsheets. I have hundreds of spreadsheets that I need to publicize at some point.
Well, we'll look forward to that. In the meantime, I guess if folks want to see the in the works version of this, hop onto the Discord and dig it up, because it sounds like there's been some conversations about it. Great. Dan, we are just about out of time. So any final thoughts on money in D&D?
I love the silver standard. It seems really tasteful. It allows you to use historical sources to fill in gaps. It gives you this upward graduation if players start with silver and then they go to gold and platinum or gems or something else. When you modify the weight to historical levels, like you're talking about, Paul, you can haul out legitimately valuable treasure hauls, and just so many things make sense. And again, this idiom that D&D money is just totally nonsensical and there's no way you could ever make sense about it. Just like instead of gold, it's silver, and instead of 10 per pound, it's like 100 per pound. You're pretty much on the ball game at that point. It doesn't take, not perfect, but it doesn't take too much of a tweak, and you're actually pretty real world all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, and it feels right and it looks right. When I try to imagine it or visualize it in my head. A lot of these thoughts, frankly, for me, were originating from visiting a museum in Britain and seeing, because it's very common, frankly, I guess, around there to find these caches of coins buried in random places, because that happened, right? And you look at these piles of coins that were discovered, buried, the literal buried treasure from the medieval period, and the coins are quite small. And there's a couple hundred of them at best, right? They're not, it's not, and it just lines up.
And it matches.
It looks good. It feels
good. It matches
good.
players' intuitions, right? If you get a brand new player into the game, see, if you're an old expert in any game, you wind up hand waving away all these abstractions that have built up over time, right? But if a new player comes into the game, you want their intuitions to be relevant. And if I have a bag full of coins, you kind of feel like there ought to be like 1,000 and not like 20. I think that kind of connection to the real world really gives additional depth to your game, and I'm all for that.
Agreed. It's unusual, I think, Dan, that you and I have these kind of topics like this where we're just like, yep, total agreement, absolutely. This is the right way to do it, and you should just do it that way. So I think that's interesting. If any of our viewers have contrary thoughts, you're wrong. But maybe leave us a comment here in the YouTube video. Point out why you think maybe it should be different, or other thoughts, other ideas of how to deal with stocking your dungeon with treasure. Like, that's an upcoming show. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Maybe that'll help feed some of our thoughts in that direction. Leave us some comments. Let us know what you think. Maybe that'll impact our next show.
Definitely. And of course, remember that you can like, follow, and subscribe to us. We're on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and Facebook and GitHub and TikTok, and we have the handle Wandering DMs on all of the sites. So look for us there. You'll get updates on upcoming shows like this one.
If you prefer to listen to our shows in audio-only podcast format, you can do so. Those shows are available on our website at wanderingdms.com. Also through various podcast carriers such as iTunes, Spotify, Pocket Cast. If you're listening to us right now on a site that offers our show and they give the ability to do so, please rate and review our show. That helps other users of that site find us, and we really appreciate it.
We really do. And of course, huge thanks to our patrons who support the show here. Just like Paul said at the top of the show, if you'd like to join them, please visit patreon.com/wanderingdms. And all of our tiers get you access to our Discord server, among other benefits. And we'll be having our after chat that we have every Sunday by video on our Discord in about 10 minutes from now. Love seeing people continue the conversation about your ideas about money or treasure or silver or experience and all kinds of stuff like that. We'll be back next Sunday. And then we're also planning, some of us are planning possibly a special show Thanksgiving Day. We'll probably talk more about that next Sunday. That's a week from now. So be on the lookout for a show we might have live here Thanksgiving Day. But, of course, we are live every 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So please join us again next week for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.